Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check today's video out. And man, guys, I say that every day, but I really appreciate it, man. I know that so many other YouTube channels out there. I really appreciate you guys supporting all three of my channels, so thank you very much for being here. Today, I want to talk about one of those things that, again, it's not flashy, but it's going to help you out big time as far as becoming a better angler. And that is how to maximize the potential of the area that you're fishing. Because it's been my experience from watching people that a lot of people they don't know when to leave and when to stay a lot of times and how to get the most out of an area, because there's a lot of different things you can do to catch more fish once things have slowed down. So we're going to talk about how once you get into an area where you're catching a few fish and you know there's some fish in there, how to literally try to catch every fish in that area. I've got some good tips and advice for you guys today, and we're going to get into that. Also, guys, just wanted to extend a big thank you out there. You hear me talking about this all the time, but thank you very much for, hitting that subscribe button here to Advanced Bass Fishing. Really appreciate that. And also, if you guys have been using the links that I'm always talking about, especially if you just bookmark and use that tackle warehouse link of mine anytime you got to buy some fishing tackle. Big thank you from me and my family. We really appreciate the support. You guys are the reason the channel's on YouTube, so thank you very much for that. Okay, I'll tell you a little story about this. I always like to give a backstory a little bit before I get into the video. And this is one time that I really learned about the importance of maximizing an area. I was fishing, this was a Bassmaster Invitational tournament, and I think it was 1987. It was a long time ago. And I drew Larry Nixon at Truman Lake. And Truman is my home lake, and, I always usually do really good up there, but for some reason, the first day of the tournament, I made a gamble. I was going to make a long run up the Osage River, and it just didn't work out. I got up there, and they just weren't biting. It was one of those deals, and I really struggled the first day and only caught a couple fish. Super disappointed being on basically my home lake. But anyway, the second day of the tournament, I drew out Larry Nixon, and I was thrilled to death to draw Larry because Larry was at the top of his game at this point. And Larry was doing pretty good. I think he was in the top 15 or something in the tournament after the first day. So I just said, yeah, Larry, whatever you want to do, I'll ride with you. We'll just do what you want to do. So this was a tough tournament. This was one of those deals where the fishing was off and it was hard to get bit. And if you caught a limit, you were doing really good. I mean, anybody that caught a limit of fish, even if they were keepers, were up in the top 20 or 25 of the tournament. So anyway, we run to this spot, and it was just a big cove. And this cove was probably, I'm going to guess maybe 100, it was probably 100 yards, maybe not even that far, 75 to 100 yards deep and probably 70 to 100 yards wide. It was just a sort of an average cove, and it had a lot of different type of cover. It had standing timber in there. It had some submerged timber, had some rock, lay down trees on the bank. Anyway, Larry gets in there, and he was throwing a square bill Bagley B3 crankbait, the old Bagley B3 shallow running crankbait. And he got in there, and the first thing we did, we made a pass around the bank, and he was targeting, lay down trees and rocks and that type of stuff. And we make a pass around the whole cove, which took probably, I don't know, maybe an hour, a little more. And I think he caught one keeper. So I was thinking at this point he was going to pull up and go to a different area. So he went right back to where we started, and he's made another pass. And the second pass, he backed out a little bit deeper, and he started just fishing. Like if there was a standing tree out there, he'd throw around that standing tree, and anything in the water he would throw at, but he was approaching it at a little bit farther out. And the second pass, he caught another keeper. So he's got two the first 2 hours. And then after we make that pass, he doesn't go back to where he started, but he just turns the boat around and starts coming back the same way he just got done fishing from a different angle. And this time it took about another hour, and he caught another one, his third keeper. So we made a couple more passes. He didn't catch anything. And at this point, I think he's going to leave. And he just kept making the same repeated passes. And about 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he caught his fourth keeper. And then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he caught his fifth keeper. So he came out of there with a limit of fish and moved. He was in the top 10 of the tournament. And he left no stone unturned in that particular place. I mean, literally, he fished everything that was in there with that crankbait. And it's like, I would have left probably after the first pass and maybe came back later, but he just went back and forth and literally caught the fish that were biting in there. So I that made a huge impression on me. And what I started doing after I saw Larry doing that is I sort of made a commitment in my fishing to maximize my area fully. If I was confident there was fish in there and it had enough cover, it had enough diversity of cover, it was a large enough area, I was going to figure out how to do the best to maximize that area. So here is how I have developed it myself. This is what I have used in it. Normally what I'll do, if I get into an area where I'm catching some fish and it feels good to be in there and I know there's a lot of potential, I'll start out with what I consider a bait to catch the most aggressive fish with. So let's say for example, I pull into this one area and I throw a big spinner bait and I may catch one, maybe make another pass and don't catch one. Okay, then at that point, instead of leaving the area, I'll make a lure adjustment. And instead of going to the big spinner bait, I'll pick up a chatterbait, make a pass with the chatterbait, same type of deal. If they're biting it, I'll stay with a little bit. If they're not biting it, I'll come back through there with another lure category and profile. The next pass, I may go through there with a jig or a Texas rig worm, or change colors or change cadence or change angle. But if I'm confident that the bass are there and that they just get conditioned to certain things and you have to trigger those fish into biting, I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to have 8 or 10 rods on the front of the boat. I'm going to be down digging through my tackle all day long, trying different colors and different sizes and just mixing it up a little bit. Sometimes if you get on the bait that they want, like the right color and the right size, especially if you're catching quality fish, it's a matter of just staying with it and just going back and forth over the same water. And then sometimes you have to make some type of an adjustment, with the lure. But in order for this to work, the area that you're fishing has got to have the ability to hold a population of fish or a group of fish. So in other words, the type of areas that you want to maximize and the type of areas that you want to spend time in are the areas that have, number one, a lot of cover in it or a diversity of cover. Now that cover can be whatever. It can be lily pads, a riprap bank, it could be lay down trees, just whatever your lake has in it. It's got to have enough cover to hold the fish. And number two is you have to have some type of a proximity to deeper water relatively close by. It doesn't have to be deep right next to it, but you don't want to have an area where you're in the very back of some flat or the very back of some creek where the fish aren't moving in and out. It's better to have some type of an area close to a highway, which is normally adjacent to a creek channel, river channel, ditch, something like that. And then the third factor with it is it helps if the area does not have a lot of notoriety or a lot of fishing pressure. If you have an area that gets a lot of fishing pressure, it makes it more difficult. But if you find one of those areas that, is a little bit off the beaten path, that's when you can really, really spend time to maximize that. And another person that really taught me a lot about this was my buddy Aaron Martins. Aaron was a master at maximizing an area because he wanted to catch every fish there. I don't care if we were fishing lay down trees or points or anything like that. He was one of those guys that taught me to go through everything in your tackle box until you've exhausted literally every single thing and, figure out what the fish was. I remember we were at the last year he won Bass Angler of the Year. We were at Table Rock Lake. It was the last tournament of the year. And he was fishing. We were rooming together or camping together in that tournament. And he was fishing points with a shaky head and a 4-inch shaky head. And he told me after the tournament, because he finished pretty high in the tournament, that he had 2 or 3 points that he fished the whole tournament. And he'd go down there and he'd start out with a little shaky head and then he'd cut it down to 2 or 3 inches. And then he'd take the shaky head off and rig it like a jig head, like with an exposed jig head. Then he'd throw a little finesse worm. Then he'd throw a drop shot. He just constantly rotated baits on those 2 or 3 points he was fishing and wound up, catching a limit every day doing that. So Point of the matter is, guys, is if you get into a good area, don't give up on it. Rotate your baits, rotate your casting angles, rotate your boat positioning, go back and forth at different angles, and just slow down and fish slow and methodically. You can't go wrong with that. So anyway, hope it helps you all out. We'll talk later.